Hello everyone, thanks for dropping by. The mail came about 30 minutes ago and I thought I'd do a video concerning one of the things that came with it. Apart from the usual junk for pizzas, camping, co-op and this, that and the other. In it was this. And in the middle is this. Mr. Farage here is electioneering in this area. You'll notice on the background there's Comrade Ed, Flip Flop Nick and Tory Boy Dave. Mr. Farage is a Mark II Tory. He only started getting bolshy about the European Union when they started regulating the banking industry, because Mr. Farage here by trade is a merchant banker. He was quite happy to make lots and lots of money when it was the EU, EEC, wherever, before we got this present political state. But as soon as they started raining on his parade and imposing on his industry, he didn't like it, and thus UKIP was born. Another thing, UKIP, yes, same. Why do they have a pound symbol? Ever thought of that? Is it because Mr. Farage is a banker and he deals in money and not making things? But anyway, here's the UKIP candidates for this area. Don't know if you can read that. Peter Nuttall, sorry, my apologies. Paul Nuttall is the MEP for this area. I've never heard him speak anything. What does he do? Anyway, he's a history lecturer by profession, i.e. an academic. So we swap one cosy world of academia for another cosy world of politics. Louise Bures, she's a student and an actress. Fair enough, they say politics is show business for ugly people, so as a student, what's she done in the real world? But I'm not sexist, so forget it. Stephen Wolfe, he's a lawyer, says it all. Schnee your Oddsy, hope I've got that pronouncement right. He's a local community activist, which means he doesn't have a real job, but he's a self-proclaimed spokesman for the Muslim community in this area because he's a Muslim, by the looks of him. Lee Slaughter, he's an interim director, which I think is a middleman in the technology sector, so wherever that is, interim director, could be warehouse directorship, something like that. I wouldn't know. Simon Noble, a solicitor, it means he's like a lawyer. Peter Harper is an IT professional. Well, he's probably been kicked out of the IT world, being he's too old by some whiz kid that's come along that knows as much as him. And as everybody knows, the IT industry just wants to hire kids. And John Stanier, he's a local holiday business owner, which at least he has experience of running a business in the real world. Not career politicians. Well, of course they're not. But it doesn't say they have much experience, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. They more or less never lived in the real world running a business, meeting a payroll every week. At least John Steyer has got some substance to him. Mr. Farage here, as I said, he's never much run a business in his life, except in the banking sector, but the banking sector doesn't produce anything. Anyway, on the top of this page we have a lady called Viviane Reding, EU Commissioner, January this year. Never heard of her. She could be a Belgian, but she could be Dutch. Reading. Doesn't sound like a Dutch name or a Belgian name. Doesn't matter. She says, "We need to build the United States of Europe with a commissioner's government." Of course you do, dear. That was the game plan from the off for the then European Economic Community and now the European Union. Even though they're doing the bidding for the neocons and the Zionists in America. Facts at your fingertips about Britain and the EU. We're likely to have more jobs after we leave the EU, maybe. 3 million. The EU won't stop trading with us. We're one of France and Germany's biggest customers, and they sell us more, 50 billion more than we sell to them. Well, they will do. We buy an awful lot of German stuff, and on the TV this morning was an ad for Mercedes cars. So he's right in that. We can tell a European Court of Human Rights where to go. And what my understanding is the European Court of Human Rights is separate from the European Commission, so I don't know where he's got that from. Then we can deport criminals if they have a cat. That's a story from this foreigner who couldn't be deported because he had a cat and it would violate his human rights. We won't have to give votes to prisoners. Agreed. They shouldn't have the vote. If they're in prison, they shouldn't have any civil rights because they broke the law, and they should have thought of what they did before they ended up in prison. And we can give whole life sentences to the worst criminals. To a point. We can trade with the world, not subsidise it. On the back here, you can read that. Mr. Farage is complaining that 4,000 people a week come to live in Britain from the EU. Well, they will be allowed to because the open trade and the free movement, but at least they're white. In the EU we can't control our own borders. True. Unlimited immigration costs British jobs. True. Cheap labour pushes Britain down wages. True. Schools, health, welfare are under pressure. True. But what Mr. Farage doesn't tell you is he's going to give 50,000 work permits, not to EU citizens from Eastern Europe. He's going to give 50,000 work permits to Sub-Saharan Africans, Indians, Pakistanis, and the rest of the Commonwealth. Which means Mr. African name, Indian name, Pakistani name, Southeast Asian name with a work permit can come here, and they can also bring the wives because that's what it means. Because Mr. Indian name, Pakistani name, Indian names, Southeast Asian name is not going to leave the missus at home looking after the children while he comes over here because the missus might think he's playing around. So that's 50,000 men with a work permit, 50,000 women with them, and they all have at least 2 kids, so that's 100,000 people coming in. Also, Mr. Farage, he's allowed, he says, any Brits that leave, then he's going to replace them. Balanced immigration, he calls it. So there's 300,000 Britons usually leave this country every year because of the high taxation, the high amount of regulation, the sometimes awful weather even though it's quite nice today, and the general state of the economy. So 300,000 plus 200,000 is 500,000, screensaver, people that Mr. Farage will let in and slowly replace us. One of the people that came in was this guy, Mr. Bhutto. He fled from Pakistan to Britain after kidnapping an opponent's young son, and he held him to ransom. He wanted £56,000, otherwise the team he was kidnapping gang, not a team, would behead the little lad. Or a charming character. There's Mr. Farage. He thinks it's wonderful. Here's another nice character. Roger Knapman, sorry. He's got a mansion, and instead of employing British tradesmen to do it up, he employed a load of Polish coolies. He says they have a very good work ethic and work so much harder than anyone over here. Well, not all Poles are good workers. I've worked with Poles. Some are good workers, yes, but some are lazy bastards, like a lot of British are lazy bastards. But this guy, double standards. So if he's standing, if you're a British tradesman, he doesn't think you are as good as a Polish worker. And even if you are, he's going to save money by hiring them instead of you. Mr. Farage. Stop sick pay for workers. UKIP would scrap more legislation regarding matters such as weekly working hours, holidays and holiday overtime, redundancy of sick pay, etc. UKIP small business policy. UKIP would scrap equality legislation. Now I go against that for a start, because I'm all in favour of equal pay. If a woman does the same job as a man, she should be paid exactly the same amount as a man, otherwise that's just plain wrong. That means that bosses could go back to paying women less for doing exactly the same job as men, like I've just said. I'm against that. Mr. Farage also says, Mrs. Thatcher was a great inspiration to me personally. I'm sure that goes down well in the Yorkshire coal mining villages and the Lancashire coal mining villages, where Thatcher destroyed the mining industry. But Mr. Farage's main problem is we have no problem with Islam. That's because he's after the Muslim vote. That's why they've been going round to the various mosques to pander to the Muslim vote. I wouldn't be doing this if this didn't come, because UKIP has a little booklet and the British National Party has a big one. You might be getting one of these during the next few weeks when the EU elections really kicks in. That's the British National Party's policy on the bottom. All this is on their website. But you don't see the other main parties helping the community. I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, you'll probably get one of these when if they send one to you. But anyway, that's what Mr. Farage supports. Look at that delightful lady. I bet she doesn't even know what that means or the history of it. If any of you are not English, then it's from Agincourt with the French, our old enemy, and archers, 2 fingers, because the French say they're going to cut the 2 fingers of the archers off. Anyway, apart from the big book, I've got this one. And this is a message that resonates more with me than UKIP's message. Yes to housing British families first. Why should we house foreigners coming in here without putting our own people first? You look after your own people first, like you look after your family members first, because the indigenous people of Britain are just one big family. Yes to British troops home now. Yes, what the hell are we doing in Afghanistan? We should have learnt the lessons of history, because we fought 4 wars in Afghanistan. the last one ending in 1914, and we should know that the Afghan people just don't like foreigners in their country. It's an unwinnable theatre of war, and we shouldn't be there. We were going into Iraq for the mad American neocons and George Warmonger Bush and his poodle Tony Blair. So we should bring the troops home now. Nearly 500 of those lads have been killed already. How many more before they pull out? Yes to stopping mass immigration. Because, as I said, voters are sick of immigration. You said they'd stop. If you can pause the film and read that. UKIP are only against people from Christian Eastern Europe. Alright, the not indigenous British, as in Anglo-Saxon and Celts, but within 2 generations, apart from having a peculiar sounding name, they look just like us. The locals of sub-Saharan Africa, India, Pakistan and Southeast Asia don't look like us. I've seen a few Romanians or Romanian-ish type people, buskers in town, and you can tell at a glance that they're not like us. Anyway, it says we'd let in 300,000 Asians and Africans every year. 250,000 to replace Brits who leave, plus 50,000 more with work permits to take their jobs. And remember, Mr. African, Indian, Pakistan and Southeast Asian comes with his wife and children, which is not 50,000, it's more like 200,000. Mr. Farage says it'll be a 5-year plan. So 500,000 over 5 years is 2.5 million. Where are they all going to live? The southwest is full. Can't see them moving up here because we're getting full already. Tell you where they might be living. Nick Clegg of the Lib Dems has said that they should build 3 new garden cities, each as big as Wolverhampton in the southern part of Britain. Guess who they're for? But anyway, the BNP, the British National Party, British jobs for British workers. So we should. Why import labour? Okay, there's a lot of foreign labour in the National Health Service, but as a result, the third world countries that need all these medical professionals are being drained of medical professionals, so they come and support us. They started the rot when they started selling off the nursing homes. The NHS was designed for the British people, not the world population. Safer streets. All these trouble on the streets, including that riot in the summer, was a result of the police not enforcing the law. It wasn't really about that black gangster that got killed by the police. It was just looting for convenience, because a lot of these shops being smashed up, they had no interest in what was happening. It was just an excuse for them. Animal welfare. I don't know if you've seen the BNP's protest program about halal food. With halal food, the poor animal is strung up by its feet while it's still conscious. It's not stunned at all. Screensaver. I don't like that going off. The poor animal is strung up while it's still conscious, and some bearded Islamic mullah says a prayer in Islam about it, and the animal's left to bleed to death while it's still alive and conscious. At least when it's stunned, it can't feel anything, but that's just cruel suffering. out the European Union. The BNP says it costs us 53 million a day. The UKIP says it costs 55 million per day. That's pounds, that is. Fair enough, there's only £2 million difference. We can agree on that. UKIP also wants a referendum. But I remember the referendum of 1975, and it was a loaded question with Traitor Heath. And I suspect that this coming referendum, if we ever get one, will be a similar thing. And once, if you say yes, then that's it, finished. If you say no, I suspect the EU is going to pull the same trick they did with the French, the Danes and the Irish. One more thing on it. But most importantly, preserving our identity. UKIP are not interested in identities. Mr. Farage here thinks in immigration as just numbers because he's a banker. Bankers only think in numbers. His nationalistic counter is Nick Griffin. He sees identity and what it is. We're not a foreign nation. We're English, we're Scotch, we're Welsh, we're Irish. We share a common ancestry. All these new recruits from Africa, India, Pakistan and Southeast Asia, they just have their own national identity. But why should we, in our land, have to change our ways for them? The British National Party doesn't hate ordinary people, it just hates the politicians that are using the ordinary people from these foreign countries for their own selfish, self-centered ends. And Mrs. or whatever it is, Redding, she wants to continue it on so the whole of Europe becomes just a mongrel, rootless society. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble now, so